Roger Kincaid and Rob Breckenridge.
Mr. Prime Minister, happy Thanksgiving to you, sir.
Same to you.
Prime Minister, we're hearing reports this weekend that Canadian electors are taking to advanced polls wearing various face coverings and choosing to swear an oath and provide ID rather than show their face. So with positive numbers on GDP growth in recent months and encouraging jobs reports during this campaign, and with the landmark TPP coming together during this campaign, why is it the Conservatives have made the niqab a defining issue and ballot box question for Canadians this election?
Well, actually, as you know, we've had our position on this for some time. I do think the number one issue to voters really is the economy. We know, particularly in Alberta, we're in challenging economic times. This is why we're proposing to, make investments that we know we can afford with a balanced budget and keep lowering taxes. And this is not a time for reckless economic experiments with deficits or tax hikes. And I do think that is the number one issue to voters. I know there are always in campaigns many other issues, but I think that's the number one issue.
Should Canadians show their face when voting for their parliamentarians?
Roger, in this campaign, the commitment we've made has been a longstanding policy on the citizenship ceremony, which is a public ceremony. We've said that when you're joining the Canadian family, you should reveal your identity. We've also said on some of these other issues, the Quebec government has really been a leader. The current Quebec Liberal Federalist government has been a leader in trying to deal with this emotional issue in a way that is responsible. And they've tabled a law to look at when it's appropriate to reveal identity, getting or receiving service, and we've simply said we'll take a look at options there. But I think this is a big issue, to be frank, with some people, not because of the position we've taken, which is supported by the overwhelming, massive majority of Canadians, because the other parties continue insisting on taking a position that is simply out of step with Canadian values.
Yeah, and one wonders, though, if the Conservative government maybe didn't necessarily defend this principle by their actions in the past, particularly with C-23, the Fair Elections Act, and not changing this law so that one must show their face when voting.
Well, as I say, our focus has been on the citizenship ceremony, and in terms of the most recent electoral law, the main thing we did there, as you know, was actually create the necessity of having identification. And at this point, we've created a range of identification. We haven't insisted on photo ID. It's simply identification. So, that's the position we took. I continue to believe this is an issue, primarily because the other parties have taken positions that are offside with Canadian values of equality and openness, and they've got the Canadian public kind of up in arms about it, but that's ultimately for them to deal with.
You mentioned Alberta in your response, and I want to come back to the Alberta economic question in just a second. But first, we see that current polls are indicating Liberals in the lead here, and we wonder if there are any post-election scenarios whereby you would remain in office and work within a coalition should the Conservatives not win the most seats.
Well, Roger, I'm not going to speculate on those kinds of outcomes. We believe not only we can win, but we believe it's essential to keep our economy moving forward, creating jobs, creating growth, that we keep our taxes down, balance our budget, and not take risky experiments. The Liberal Party is proposing levels of new spending 25 times our levels. They're proposing to hit the average Canadian worker with a payroll tax hike of $1,000 off of average worker's paycheck, another $1,000 off the employer, the small business community in this country, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Half of them say they'll cut jobs if we have that kind of thing. So I think when Canadians haven't made a decision yet, I think when they take a look at their own best interest, the best interest of the economy, they'll opt for an economic plan that has kept us moving through very difficult times and will keep us moving forward, rather than the high debt, high tax policies that have thrown so many developed countries into the ditch.
Your no-brainer comment on Keystone XL, it's interesting to hear your rivals spin that and attack you on that question, when that messaging in Alberta is far more likely to be received as an apt description of the importance of the Keystone XL pipeline project. How frequently have you personally and even privately met with U.S. Ambassador Heyman in an effort to get Keystone XL approved?
Well, I was going to say it actually, the comment is reflective of the studies the U.S. government itself has done, which said that the project will create jobs, obviously create jobs on both sides of the border. It will lead to greater energy security in the North American continent. and it's certainly environmentally preferable to other options. So, look, it's no secret that I've raised this with President Obama, and we've continued to raise it all down the line. He says, he'll ultimately make his own decision based on his view of America's best interests. I think we have to respect that. What I would say, though, what I'll keep saying, is that if you look at public opinion in the United States, it is overwhelmingly in favor of this project. Almost all the Republican Party, a big chunk of the Democratic Party, both houses of Congress, labor as well as industry. So I think that inevitably the logic of this dictates this project eventually gets done, but in the meantime, we'll continue to express our view.
Particularly here in southern Alberta, sir, people recognize that, and anybody with a passing interest in American politics understands that this is merely a political issue and hardly an environmental one. Something that President Obama seems to be keeping as his own power piece on the chessboard, if you will. But we do wonder what the Prime Minister is doing in terms of using the U.S. ambassador to Canada as a liaison to push this project forward. Have you met personally or even privately with
I've
Ambassador
absolutely raised
Heyman?
it with the ambassador, but I've raised it on several occasions with the President himself, who is obviously my main interlocutor. So we will continue to do that. But look, Roger, I think you quoted the other parties earlier. Look, these guys go around the country. I mean, when we had a debate in Calgary, they sounded a little bit friendly to the energy sector. These guys go around the country, whether it's the projects to the West Coast or Energy East or Keystone, constantly saying they'll be against projects before they even receive an environmental scientific assessment. This is the only party that wants to encourage investment in the energy sector. Of course, we ultimately act based on scientific assessment, but this is I think Albertans understand full well, this is the only party that wants to see our energy industry continue to grow and thrive.
At $45 a barrel, is it still a no-brainer, or does that change the complexity of the question?
I think you'd be better to ask people in the industry that. My own sense, Roger, is that it probably takes some of the urgency away. But given the long-term growth in oil and gas and oil demand and across the continent, I think there will continue to be a need to increase pipeline capacity in the decade to come.
With respect to these other pipeline projects that don't cross international boundaries, there is, I believe, a pretty reasonable comparison to be made between pipelines and railways. The railway that crossed our country was of national interest and was a national project. Do provinces have too much power in determining the outcome, the fate of pipeline projects?
I don't think that is the case. I mean, I think time will tell going forward. We're following a defined environmental process at the national level. People say we made these massive changes to the process. The main change we made, Roger, was actually putting a timeline on it. So the process actually has to reach a decision within 2 years. Before we did that, these processes could go on literally forever. So we established a fixed process. We promised investors a decision, yes or no. In the case of Northern Gateway, for instance, the assessment recommended some 200 conditions on the project. So that's what we put on, and that's how we'll continue to move forward going forward. I would be very surprised if provinces started to interfere in a serious way in interprovincial trade or this and another matter, because that could rebound on everybody.
Prime Minister, I wanted to thank you very much for your time today. It's been much appreciated.
I appreciate the opportunity.